guys? This is another episode of 49 Reasons to Listen. I am your host, Juju Talk Sports. I'm joined by my co-host, Jose Corral, and we are going to be talking about arguably one of the most polarizing quarterbacks in the league. Happens to be the franchise QB for the team we all love, our San Francisco 49ers. And there's many different voices in terms of this narrative that Jimmy G is a replaceable quarterback or a subpar quarterback. Probably the loudest of which is one Stephen A. Smith. So, Jose, before we really even get into the argument about Jimmy G, I'm just going to play you some clips, to kind of give a little pretext here and tell me what you think of one Stephen A.
Jimmy G can play. He is not a scrub, okay? But my position is you think about 4 levels of people before you even get to Jimmy G, and that's rare when you look at a franchise quarterback. You think about y'all secondary. You think about your defensive line. You think about you, who I've got top 2 tight end in football with you and Travis Kelce. And last but not least, you think about the play calling of Kyle Shanahan. I'm not even saying that Jimmy G can't play. I would never disrespect a brother like that. What I am saying is when you are a franchise quarterback, you're usually thought of first. But in San Francisco, you think about all of those elements before you get to Jimmy G. That is my position. What do you say to that? Molly gave him the nickname Jimmy G. You've been bringing him up and made him a star because you used him to highlight Tom Brady, okay? The only person that brought him down to earth was me calling him Pornstar Jimmy, a nickname he absolutely earned, which, by the way, is not an insult in my mind. But that's what I called him. But then I let that go because Mama Garoppolo is probably watching someplace, and I don't want to be like that. I don't want it to be misconstrued.
Well, he should have thought of that.
Even though I wasn't insulting that. But the bottom line is stop it. Let's just stop it, please. He's lucky to be there. He's lucky to be there.
All right, so that is Stephen A. Smith's take on Jimmy Garoppolo, Jimmy Pornstar Garoppolo to him and the wider ESPN audience. Now, first off, I will say technically he did earn Pornstar Jimmy. It is what it is. We know what category he has bookmarked whenever he goes to the internet late at night. So that's not out of the question. But the biggest thing I would take away from that, and I'm going to put this to you, is do you think about 4 or 5 levels of the 49ers before you think of Jimmy Garoppolo?
On that 2019 team, I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to elaborate on that, and I'm going to explain why that's not a bad thing. And I'm going to explain why that doesn't necessarily mean he's not a franchise quarterback. When you think of a franchise quarterback, to me, it's a guy that's going to give you the best chance to win. And if that's Jimmy Garoppolo for the Niners, which, he's ever since he's gotten to the team, he hasn't showed any other indication that he's not. I think it's okay if, sure, we talk about the defensive line before we talk about him. It's okay if we talk about the secondary, which I would disagree with Stephen A. Smith there. We definitely don't talk about the secondary when it comes to the importance of the team before Jimmy Garoppolo. And we talk about, George Kittle. In that interview, he was talking to George Kittle there. We maybe even talk about the running game, especially late in the season last year. But that's not a bad thing. To me, that's not a bad thing. The fact that, maybe we think about 2 different layers of the Niners before we think of Jimmy Garoppolo. To me, that doesn't exclude him from being a franchise quarterback. To me, he's still the guy that I want in, the red and gold. At the end of the day, I still want him to be the quarterback that he has been, and especially the quarterback that he was this past season. So with that, I think even if we do talk about him, playing, 4th after, the running game, after George Kittle, after the defense, after Kyle Shanahan's play calling, maybe the reason why he's probably maybe even better now, it might be because of Kyle Shanahan's play calling, and that's okay. I have no problems with that. I am okay with Jimmy Garoppolo being the 4th tier of this team. If that means he's going to have results like he did this past season, I'm 100% okay with that.
Now, here's where I kind of think that Jimmy G's importance is very underplayed with the Niners. We have seen the Niners without Jimmy Garoppolo. The season that he was first traded to them, they had 1 total win on the year prior to ripping off those 5 games at the end of 2017. You could say some of those teams, maybe they weren't playing as hard, maybe they didn't give a shit, but he played well against the Titans. He played well against the Jaguars, both playoff teams that year. Then you fast forward to the following year, 2018. So we were all excited for that year. Everyone was coming into that year with such a sense of optimism about how the Niners could do. And unfortunately, week 3, he tears his ACL against Kansas City. And then from that point on, the Niners proceeded to win a total of 3 more games for the rest of the year. They were already 1-1 on the season with him. So following that, when he plays 16 games, they're in the Super Bowl. They're 13-3. They're the number 1 seed in a loaded NFC conference and a difficult NFC West division against those Seattle Seahawks. So part of the problem is when this narrative started to really form about how important is Jimmy G to the Niners was the playoff run. And you look at that. So the Vikings game, hey, you're not playing against a bunch of scrubs. You're playing against Everson Griffin. You're playing against Eric Kendricks. You're playing against a vaunted Vikings defense that's going to give a lot of quarterbacks trouble. And then the following week, he just got game planned out of the script. The fact that the Niners only had to throw the ball 8 times shouldn't be looked at as a negative. It should be looked at as more of an indictment on the Packers that they couldn't stop the run. And after a certain point, when you're up 30, why are you throwing the ball? If you're going to criticize Kyle Shanahan for his game management, then you have to consider they were doing the right thing. You're beating this team with the run. Keep running it down their throats until they can stop you. And then the Super Bowl. So as far as the Super Bowl goes, there was a couple bad moments. Not going to lie. There was the no-look interception. That was a horrible highlight hit for him. And then there was the big overthrow to Emmanuel Sanders late. But in that said, you still had a moment there where he was rocking 10 for 12. He was solid through 3 quarters of play. They were leading the Super Bowl game. So Jimmy G's importance to this team, I think, can't be understated because when he's not on the field, they are a bad team. They are a bad football team. That has been shown. The defense, while it was obviously amazing last year, and last video we talked about how great that 2019 defense was, that 2018 defense was pretty much the same group except for obviously Nick Bosa, D Ford were 2 big additions. But for the most part, the 2018 group and the 2019 group aren't that different. And that team did not look like the same team that they were the following season. So that's kind of my point on Jimmy G. Now, the next kind of thing I'm going to ask you is Jimmy G above a replacement level quarterback, would you say?
100%. He's definitely above a replacement level quarterback. I mean, we're sure as hell paying him like he should be. And he is, especially this past season, he has been playing above that, way above that. He's been playing, in my estimations, top 10 quarterback in the league. If you kind of look at, winning games, just look at the games in general, teams that he had to face, that stretch that he had there towards the second half of this past season. I mean, you just kind of look at the teams that he had to go up against towards the middle of that season against Seattle. The New Orleans game, I mean, you could talk about him on that game. He basically won the game for them, just basically with his arm. And just everything that he had to deal with this season, he had to deal with quite a bit of injuries, not just to, weapons around him, but also that offensive line. I mean, Joe Staley went out for quite a bit, and he had to play through that, and he still, racked up 13 wins and took his team to the Super Bowl. So, yeah, 100%, I would say he's definitely above replacement quarterback. And, we're paying him like he is one, and he's been playing like one. So, yeah, I would definitely say that he is.
Well, that's an interesting point in itself. You bring up the contract. So Jimmy G came under heavy criticism for signing that deal, given his lack of game experience. Last season was the first time that he played all 16 games. He has less career starts than Baker Mayfield, a third-year starting quarterback. So has he lived up to that deal, would you say?
Yes.
Okay.
I think he has. I think he's definitely getting you to a Super Bowl is not an easy thing. Going through the NFC, we got to remember the NFC is loaded. The NFC is stacked. It was last year, and it's going to be for the next couple of years. And he got through that conference and got the team to the Super Bowl. That's definitely worth the contract in itself right there. And if maybe the next couple of years in his contract, he could, either take the team back to the Super Bowl or even win one, 100% worth what they were paying him. Which back in, he signed the contract, I believe, in 2017? He signed the contract in 2017 after they traded for him during that offseason. So looking at that contract now, it's really not as daunting as, some contracts that have been signed since then. And you kind of look at quarterbacks like Dak Prescott that are asking for, tons of money. When you look at really what he's getting paid, it's not what it's going to be, 5 years from now when quarterbacks are going to be probably getting paid to almost close to 35 to 45 million, $40 million a year. And with him being around $25 million a year, that doesn't actually seem as bad as it first did back in 2017. And the fact that he once already took you to a Super Bowl and it's only looking, bright from here, I think he's definitely worth a contract for now.
It's going to be interesting is to see how Jimmy's contract kind of develops over time. You mentioned that now it seems like they're getting him at a bargain compared to like other star quarterbacks in the league. Like $28 million a year, that's not half bad. So my thought on it is like that's going to be interesting over time. Is Jimmy going to be the type like Tom Brady to give his team a discount, or is he going to be one that always commands a top 5 salary, a top 10 salary? That's going to be one of those things that's going to come up with Jimmy G. Luckily, they don't have to deal with that for maybe about another 3 years before we start getting into that, like, what are we doing with him? But you look at all the major categories, and this guy's doing pretty damn well. You mentioned that top 10 quarterback statistics. I mean, in terms of completion percentage, top 4 in the league. In terms of third down percentage, the number 1 quarterback in the league. And that's one of the biggest things for me whenever I'm watching a game. So as modern day Niners fans, we've seen a lot of bad quarterback play. Let's be real. There was a point in the mid-2000s where we were begging for Sean Hill to play instead of Alex Smith. As I'm wearing the Steve Young jersey, I only have Steve Young as a memory. Now, I think there's a certain expectation with that Niners quarterback position because you have guys like Steve Young, because you have quarterbacks in your history like, to some, still the greatest of all time, Joe Montana. You're expected to be in that tier. I mean, look at this year's Super Bowl commercial for the NFL 100, where they have Jimmy G as the luggage boy for Joe Montana and Steve Young. Now, I don't think it's improbable for Jimmy to ascend to that tier. It's going to be ultimately dependent on can he win a Super Bowl. Unfortunately, the Niners, as we know, are 0-2 in their last 2 attempts there. And as far as their ability to get back, you would think that that's still on the table for at least another 2-3 years. I think it's on the table as long as Shanahan and Jimmy are together, honestly. I think that those two have something really going for them. You look at some of the other criticisms for Jimmy. So there's this perception that he's not a deep ball passer, that he doesn't have that extra gear. Well, I'm going to counter that a little. Although he is pretty much dead last in terms of air yards in the league, he is actually has a top 3 completion percentage on balls of thrown 20 yards or plus. Probably the biggest problem with that is just he doesn't throw the ball as often as Patrick Mahomes does in that area. And again, he missed one big one in the Super Bowl there. Now, just with that said, you just look at the way that this guy's teammates love him. He's a leader on this team. He's someone that his teammates will really like fall on a sword for. Let's look at something that I actually got another clip here that I'll show. And this is something that George Kittle had to say about Jimmy G.
It's not his fault. He has Nick Bosa. He has 5 first-round D linemen. He has Richard Sherman in the secondary. That's not his fault. He goes out there and he performs week in, week out. Like I said, leads the league in third down percentage. He makes throws. He won us 2 games versus Arizona. He won us the Rams game at the end of the game. He won a shootout with Drew Brees, who in my opinion is one of the best quarterbacks to do it. He shows up every single week. Yeah, hey, guys have bad plays. I've had my fair share of bad plays, and his are just viewed more because he's a quarterback. He's the franchise quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, so people see that more. Hey, and he deals with it. He doesn't shy away from, criticism. He goes in. He had a great, conversation after the Super Bowl. He was great with the media. He doesn't shy away. He's a leader, through and through, and he's a leader of this football team.
Yeah, so, you listen to George's comments, and I think the teammate element is one of the biggest things for Jimmy. What does he need to do to be recognized for all the work he does?
I think what probably needs to happen, maybe he just guys to put up bigger numbers. I mean, I'm not too sure. I mean, I really don't know what the problem is with people not recognizing what he does, especially since he's only, only started one complete season, career record 21-5. That in itself, I don't understand how people could just look at it and kind of disregard that this guy isn't, deserving of the contract that he has, or some people even go to the extent that he shouldn't even be the future quarterback of the 49ers. He isn't a franchise quarterback, like we saw kind of Stephen Smith, kind of allude to that. But I think maybe just putting up bigger numbers, I guess nowadays with fantasy football, with people just kind of looking at stats a little bit more, he doesn't really jump out to you in some of the major categories like pass completions or passing yards. He's not really going to be top 5 maybe any year that he's going to be playing in the league. Maybe that would be the thing that would just set him to a higher standard for people to say, okay, this guy is, one of the better quarterbacks in the league. He has one of the better arms in the league. Other than that, would just probably just win the Super Bowl, because winning he does. He's done that ever since he stepped into the league. Even his first season, the 2 games that he had to play whenever Tom Brady got the suspension, he still won those 2 games in New England. So he's been a winner. If people don't like winning, I mean, I can't help you with that. I'm sorry, but I guess maybe just for people to start recognizing him as one of the better quarterbacks in the league, I guess he's going to have to put up bigger numbers as far as categories like some of the categories that people kind of pay attention to, passing yards, pass completions, passing touchdowns, stuff like that. But other than that, I mean, he's had everything else.
I mean, he's a top 6 quarterback in terms of passing touchdowns. I think one of the biggest knocks, and we can all agree with this for watching Jimmy G, as he is a top 8 quarterback in terms of interceptions, on the wrong side of interceptions. In fact, I am sure that he is determined to give every single middle linebacker in the league at least 1 pick off of him, because Eric Kendricks got him, Luke Kuechly got him. I'm pretty sure Chandler Jones got him last year. So, that is one of the biggest knocks I can think on in terms of Jimmy. Can he even that out? He threw officially 13 interceptions last year. I don't think he's ever going to be a 6 or 7 interception guy. That's part of the problem. And that's actually part of why I love Jimmy. He's not afraid to take risk. We see a lot of guys that they'll play it safe. They won't throw those risky throws that he'll put out there. And what does that get you? One of the things that I love about Jimmy's play is, even though he'll throw those picks, whenever ESPN or Fox would throw up the graphics of his bounce back percentage, literally the drive after an interception for Jimmy, he's practically throwing 80% completion percentage, multiple scoring drives. The guy has a quick memory. He has one of those short-term memories just to get it out there, and he'll come back harder than ever. And that's actually why I'm kind of intrigued about this coming year, because for a guy that has that kind of mindset after throwing an interception, could you imagine his kind of mindset coming off a Super Bowl loss? And that's what intrigues me. That is one thing that I'm very – and he's not even doing the media rounds. I don't think I've heard from Jimmy since the Super Bowl. So I think that kind of speaks to his kind of character. I think being in New England all those years probably did that for him. I just want to put to bed and my point of doing this video and getting this together is too, I'd love to put to bed the rumors of Tom Brady coming in, or Kirk Cousins coming in, or we're going to hear the narrative of Aaron Rodgers coming in. When you think about those quarterbacks, when you think about those 3 names I threw out there, I'm pretty sure you're in line with me on this one. You would take Jimmy over all 3 of those guys right now, today, correct?
100%. I would take Jimmy Garoppolo over all 3 of those guys. Whenever Tom Brady we basically knew pretty early in the offseason that he wasn't going to re-sign with New England. And then there was that notion that John Lynch wanted to get him for a couple of years in San Francisco, and they basically just get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo. I was not on board with that at all. Terrible idea. And then there was also trading for Kirk Cousins. Definitely not on board with that either, which I'm not a Kirk Cousins hater, but you could just kind of see it when both of them, I mean, they both played against each other in the playoffs, and we saw what happened. So I would definitely not do that. And the Aaron Rodgers one, I mean, you saw Aaron Rodgers twice against Jimmy Garoppolo, and it was not close. I mean, I just don't understand the notion of maybe getting one of those guys late in their careers, especially for Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. getting rid of a 28-year-old quarterback in his prime that just took you to a Super Bowl, won 13 games, for Aaron Rodgers, who's about to be 37 and isn't getting any younger, or for Tom Brady, who's 42 years old. That just doesn't make any sense for me. It would make sense for Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he would be able to go back to his hometown team and the team that he grew up cheering for, and the team that he probably wished did draft him back in 2005. So for him, it would make sense. But for the Niners, that would be terrible. No, that I do not agree with any of those three guys coming in to be the Niners quarterback and replacement of him. And I actually don't see a lot of better options than Jimmy Garoppolo, a lot of realistic options where John Lynch can go and say, okay, maybe if I make a couple moves, I could get a better guy that's going to do what Jimmy Garoppolo has already done for our team. I don't see a better option at this point right now.
I mean, let's go through it because these guys aren't falling in your lap anytime soon. You would obviously put Patrick Mahomes ahead of Jimmy. You would maybe put Deshaun Watson ahead of Jimmy. Lamar Jackson, we haven't seen him develop fully as a passer, but you'd probably put him ahead of Jimmy Garoppolo at this moment. Gosh, I'm starting to go through this list. Again, we're talking about the Aaron Rodgers one. Long term, I would probably not go with Aaron Rodgers. And even in the short term, I wasn't incredibly impressed by what he was able to do. Let's see some other names to throw out there. You went maybe Carson Wentz. I would probably take Carson Wentz in a certain situation over Jimmy. But if you want to talk about Jimmy being injury prone, let's face it, Carson Wentz is setting the standard for injury prone quarterbacks. You would take Russell Wilson. So all in all, you're still looking at Jimmy as like a top 7, a top 8 guy. We mentioned top 10, but I mean, there's not a lot of guys that you would put ahead of him. The only what is like a realistic situation in which you would actually go out of your way to replace Jimmy G? What would that season look like for you for Jimmy to be replaceable after the 2020 season?
After the 2020 season, man, you talk about realistic stuff maybe happening. I don't know. Bill O'Brien does some crazy things in Houston. Maybe he's all like, okay, maybe I'll send Deshaun Jackson to San Francisco. Deshaun Watson, to San Francisco. Other than that, I don't really see anything. Obviously, Kansas City is not going to get rid of Patrick Mahomes anytime soon.
Yeah. But what would be that standard for Jimmy? Like, what would Jimmy have to do to be replaced in your mind? How bad does that season have to look?
Oh, that would have to be a terrible, sub 500 season. He looks completely different, like a complete 180 of what he looked like last season, which I don't see happening. But if for some reason he just stinks it up in 2020 and he, goes 6-10,
20 plus interceptions or
20 plus interception, has like a Jameis Winston year where he's just 30 for 30 the wrong way. I mean, if he's still
throwing 30 touchdowns, I guess, right?
I guess, but I guess if the number just really spikes on the turnovers, not just interceptions, he did lose a couple of fumbles in key moments of the season as well too. If the turnovers just kind of skyrocket and you see a really, drastic drop where we still have basically the same talent as last season, and if we for some reason go 8, even like 6-7, 7-9, then you would kind of look at it. It's like, okay, maybe Aaron Rodgers has one more year in the tank. Let's just give Aaron Rodgers all this talent to work with. And then maybe he, has 1 year left to where he, obviously the Packers don't want him probably past these past couple of years with them drafting Jordan Love. So maybe that would be the only scenario where I see John Lynch being like, okay, maybe Jimmy Garoppolo might have a turnover problem. And we could possibly, let's not ruin our championship window with a quarterback that is going to be turning the ball over in key moments. And let's go with a guy that's done it before, who would want to be here and who wants to prove one more time that he is still an elite quarterback with Aaron Rodgers. That would be the only scenario that I would see John Lynch and even Kyle Shanahan wanting to get somebody else under center other than Jimmy Garoppolo.
All right. Well, let's end this with like some personal goals for Jimmy G this year. So he finished with just under 4,000 passing yards. Ideally, let's get that over 4,000, right? He had 27 touchdowns compared to 13 interceptions. I'm thinking if he could get that touchdown number over 30 and get that interception number under 10 or right at 10, that's all good with me. In terms of like completion percentage, 69.1, top 5, that's like tough to do better than that. If he could get that over 70%, have like a Drew Brees type year, perfect. But, you know, I'm not expecting that to like go up dramatically. And in fact, I think it just is what it is. And in terms of the win percentage, I mean, we've already made our predictions based off the schedule. I think if they're 12-4, winning the NFC West again, then in terms of team performance, that's good enough. I think that's like my personal goals. If Jimmy can somehow, this is going to be a long shot here, but get some MVP votes, then that would be a perfect way to kill this narrative. Any final thoughts?
No, I'm right there with you. You mentioned he was basically a pass away from getting to 4,000 yards this past season. So if he could just get over the hump of getting 4,000 yards, which is very, very doable for him and for that Kyle Shanahan offense. You mentioned the turnovers. That's probably the biggest area as far as like individual play for him is definitely the turnovers, the interceptions, even losing a couple fumbles. If you could get those interceptions under 10, under double digits, that would be huge for him and huge for the team as well. You wouldn't be putting that defense in pretty bad situations. You look at the touchdowns. If you could be, again, close to the top 5 or maybe even top 5 in touchdowns this next season, that would be great too. You look at the winning. I mean, he's got that down pat. You mentioned if 12-4, I predicted them finishing at 11-5. I'm still okay with that. But yeah, you mentioned the MVP, getting MVP votes. That's going to be really hard because, you know, Russell Wilson is still good and he's still going to get a lot of votes.
I'm not saying he has to win MVP.
Right.
But if he could get some votes going somehow, I think that would be huge. And I think that kind of goes into what Stephen A. was saying about this. Like, you look at his teammates and you discredit him. So I feel like that is like he's at risk of having MVP votes stolen away from him just because of product, how good his team is. Similar to, like, for example, Golden State Warriors, where Kevin Durant and Steph Curry just kind of still votes away from each other. That's kind of what I feel could happen because it's like, oh, Jimmy's good, but I mean, look how good his defense is. You know, so that kind of sucks for him on that respect. But if he could get like just at least, I don't know, 5 voters to say, you know what, I feel comfortable putting Jimmy G on my MVP ballot. And I think that would kind of play hand in hand with him having similar numbers to what we're talking about here. Because, you know, I mean, all things considered, I mean, it's still crazy to say this. Russell Wilson, you mentioned his name. He's never received an MVP vote. So it's a crazy statistic there. Lamar's going to be up there. Patrick Mahomes, I mean, I have a feeling he's going to want his award back. So guess we'll see on that one. But all right, guys, I think that should wrap it up here. Another great episode of 49 Reasons to Listen. Let us know what you think of Jimmy Garoppolo. Let us know what you think of the Niners' future. We'll be back again with another episode next week. I'm Juju Talk Sports. This is Jose, and we'll see you next week. Peace out.
See you guys.